there was a time when going to the toilet meant sitting right next to a stranger. No walls, no doors, just a long stone bench with holes, cold air on your legs, and one wet sponge that everyone had to share. You didn't just lose your privacy, you had to take turns with it. Welcome to the sponge age, where going to the bathroom was a group activity. Before we begin, comment below where you're from and what time it is. I'll like every one of your comments. Now, dim your lights, get cozy, and maybe, don't picture the sponge. You land with a thud. It's warm, the sun is blinding, the air smells like sweat, wine, and something vaguely barnyard. You blink, disoriented, as the sounds of sandals slapping stone echo all around you, shouting vendors, clattering carts, the metallic ring of swords at soldiers' hips. It hits you all at once. Welcome to ancient Rome. You did it. You've time traveled, and for a few blissful seconds you're caught up in the awe of it all. The marble buildings gleam like polished bones. A senator in a bright white toga strides past, his nose high in the air. Children run through alleyways chasing a stray dog. Everything is beautiful, chaotic, alive. And then your stomach growls. Loudly. Right, that suspicious-looking meat pastry you grabbed before time jumping? Not your best idea. Your intestines twist. Your awe fades. Now there's only one thing on your mind. Where's the bathroom? You scan the city square in a panic. No signs, no stalls, no convenient rows of porta-toilets. You shuffle over to a nearby man balancing a basket of eels. Toilet? You ask. He blinks. Latrina. You nod furiously. He points behind the bathhouse with a grin that's just a little too knowing. You thank him, try not to run, and head that way, clutching your gut like it owes you money. The building looks decent enough from the outside. Arched entryway, faded murals. You take a breath. Maybe it's not so bad. Maybe you'll get a little privacy. You step inside, and then you stop, and blink, and reconsider every decision that brought you to this moment. There are no stalls, no walls, no curtains, just a long, smooth stone bench with large holes cut into it, lined up in a neat row like some kind of punishment game. At least a dozen people are already seated, robes hiked up, chatting like it's happy hour. You stare, they stare back. One of them waves. You back up a little, then freeze again. Because your stomach is no longer growling, it's screaming. You step forward, pretending to be brave. You tell yourself it's fine. Romans were civilized. They built aqueducts. They conquered the world. Surely, their toilet system can't be that bad. You approach the bench like it's your execution platform. A space opens up. A man scoots to the side and gestures politely. Vacant, he says, smiling. You sit. The stone is cold, unforgiving. Your knees touch the person beside you. You keep your eyes on the floor. You breathe through your mouth. You pray no one starts a conversation. And that's when you hear it, a cheerful voice from your left. First time? You nod slowly. He chuckles, adjusting his robe. Don't worry, he says. You'll get used to it. Just don't drop anything in the hole. You glance down. The hole is deep, dark, and suspiciously echoey. You begin to regret not reading more about ancient sanitation before traveling back in time. But it's too late now. you're here. You need to go, and unfortunately, this is just the beginning. You try not to breathe too deeply. The air is thick, warm, sour, and strangely social. Around you, people sit shoulder to shoulder, robes bunched at their hips, as casual as if they were sharing a bench in the marketplace. No one seems rushed. No one seems shy. Everyone, it seems, is entirely too comfortable with this situation. You, on the other hand, are performing a delicate balance act, physically and emotionally, one cheek on the stone, the other suspended in mild panic. Every shift of weight threatens a splash. Every glance around the room confirms the awful truth. No one here believes in privacy. Conversations unfold around you, unbothered by the sounds or smells of digestion. Someone near your left knee is discussing fish prices. Another, further down the line, brings up a recent chariot crash on the Appian Way. At least 2 people are loudly comparing the merits of rival gladiators with increasing passion. It's like a sports bar. But everyone's pants are down. You try to keep your eyes fixed on the wall ahead, a mosaic of dolphins and sea gods, their little stone faces locked in permanent amusement. You envy their distance. You wonder what it would feel like to be as emotionally detached as a bathroom dolphin. The person next to you shifts and makes a comment. Something about the weather, maybe, or the lack of wine at last night's feast. You nod politely. It feels rude not to. They seem to think this is a perfectly normal place for small talk. You can't help but wonder how many friendships in Rome began like this. How many business deals were struck mid-defecation? How many awkward silences were filled with casual updates on grain shortages and military campaigns? One man down the row chuckles, probably retelling some tale about a senator who fell into the sewer. Laughter ripples through the room, mixed with the sound of shifting sandals and the occasional unfortunate splash. No one flinches. No one even reacts. This place isn't just a toilet. It's a meeting space, a social arena, a place to relieve yourself in more ways than one. Mentally, physically, emotionally, perhaps. You begin to notice how people choose their seats, not too close, not too far, just enough space to chat, but not enough to feel cold. Some even seem to have favorite spots. The back corner hosts a group that clearly knows each other. They laugh often, hands gesturing as if this is their daily ritual. At some point, someone starts humming. A gentle, lazy tune. The kind you might hear from a baker or a stable hand. It floats above the general murmur like incense in a temple. You find it oddly comforting. If people can hum here, maybe you can survive this. A worker enters with a bucket and ladle. He pours a bit of water down each hole, wiping the stone edges as he goes. Efficient. Mechanic. Completely unbothered. Another reminder. To them, this isn't weird. This is just life. For a brief moment, you let your guard down. Maybe this isn't so bad. Maybe, in a strange, horrifying way, you're starting to adapt. Your body relaxes a little. Your thoughts drift. And then, out of the corner of your eye, you see it. A hand. Reaching out. Holding something long. Wooden. Damp. Your heart skips. The sponge. Your time has come. It's in front of you now. The sponge. Rough, gray, damp, and gently dripping with something you hope is just water. It's mounted on the end of a worn wooden stick, about the length of your forearm, and being handed to you like some sacred relic. or a punishment. You hesitate. You're not ready for this. You were never ready for this. There are moments in life that prepare you for hardship. Late buses, heartbreak, tax season. But nothing prepares you for the moment a stranger offers you a shared wiping device with visible moisture on it. The hand offering it lingers. You can't pretend not to see it. And worse, you've just finished. You need it. So you take it. It's heavier than you expected. The sponge squishes slightly in your grip. A faint warmth radiates from its surface, like a dying memory of someone else's regret. Your soul leaves your body for a moment as you contemplate your options. You glance to the side. A shallow trough runs along the front of the bench, filled with cloudy water. A few other sponges rest in it, soaking. You wonder if that's supposed to clean them. You try not to wonder too hard. There's no soap, no separate sponge per person, no labels, no system. Just a cycle. Use, rinse, return. Civilization, it seems, has its limits. With grim determination, you do what must be done. It's not graceful, it's not comfortable, it's not successful. The sponge is too soft in some places, too rough in others. It folds when you don't want it to. It resists when you do. Your body cringes with every movement. You imagine how many lives this sponge has touched, literally. You think of senators, beggars, bakers, and drunks, of philosophers deep in thought, of lovers between meetings, all united by this one tool. This one terrible, terrible sponge. When you're done, you rise slowly, dignity leaking from every pore, and shuffle toward the trough. You dip the sponge into the murky water and give it a few lazy swirls, mimicking what the others did. It doesn't look cleaner, but you tell yourself it is. Then you place it back on the edge, ready for the next victim. You return to your spot and sit again, lighter now in more ways than one. A strange calm sets in. There's a brief moment of understanding, even respect, for the sheer shameless efficiency of it all. No privacy, no paper, no fluff. Just stone, water, and sponge. You look around and notice the relaxed posture of the others. Legs apart, arms resting on knees, shoulders slack. They've done this their entire lives. They're not ashamed. Why would they be? This is the way it's always been. You realize that in Rome, hygiene is less about being clean and more about not dying. If you're lucky, the sponge keeps things moving. If you're unlucky, it gives you something you'll never forget. Or survive. Still, this is better than nothing. Better than going in the street. Better than digging a pit. Probably. You imagine the future historians studying this moment. They'll ask how people lived like this. They'll write academic papers. They'll use words like communal cleansing rituals and shared hygienic resources. They'll never truly know the horror of that first damp contact. But you'll know. You'll always know. And as you sit there, surrounded by humming men, dripping sponges, and the faint scent of olive oil and despair, you finally understand the meaning of the phrase. When in Rome, you've wiped, you've rinsed, you've survived. For now. As you lean back slightly on the cold bench, trying to forget the sensation of the sponge, your eyes wander. The stone wall in front of you is cracked and aged, decorated with fading murals, sea creatures, swirling waves, and tiny gods with suspicious expressions. Above the holes, carved into the stone, are little niches, shrines, altars, You hadn't noticed them before. Tiny statues sit in each one, some worn smooth by time, others still detailed enough to make out curled beards and stern faces. One holds a staff, another a small pot, a third seems to be smirking directly at you. Each is stained with soot and age, but someone, clearly, has been tending to them. A few have offerings, coins, bits of bread, even a wilted fig. It dawns on you, slowly and with growing discomfort, that you are not alone in this room. Not entirely. The Romans, as it turns out, brought their gods with them everywhere, even into the bathroom, especially into the bathroom. Because according to them, toilets weren't just places of relief, they were places of risk. Invisible things lived in the drains, spirits, demons, curses, bad luck, disease, of course, but also something more. You glance toward the dark hole beneath you, suddenly feeling watched. The Romans believed that evil could climb, that creatures from the underworld could crawl up through the sewage and strike while you were most vulnerable. There were stories, whispers of monsters in the pipes, of snakes in the drains, of shadows that followed you home if you didn't wash properly or pray first. So they built shrines, lit incense, left tokens, muttered blessings, not for purification, but for protection. One spirit in particular comes to mind, Cloacina, the goddess of the sewers. Yes, they had one. The divine guardian of Rome's underbelly, a goddess who ruled not over skies or oceans, but waste and water. You feel a strange urge to apologize to her. You shift on the bench and notice someone a few seats away tossing a handful of herbs into the trough. It steams faintly, masking the smell for a moment. Maybe that's not for you. Maybe that's an offering. Some Romans took it further, scratching protective symbols into the walls or the bench itself. You spot a few. Circles, triangles, strange looping marks. None make sense, but all seem to say the same thing. Keep it away. The idea that the toilet was cursed makes sense now, because there is something unholy about this place. Not just the sponge, not just the smells, but the feeling, the shared vulnerability, the understanding that this might be the most dangerous place in the city, and not because of the people in it. You lean forward slightly, glancing again into the pit below. A rush of warm air rises to greet you. You pull back. No need to test the myths. So, just in case, you offer a silent thought to the shrine above your head. A little wish, awkward and rushed. No fancy words. Just something like, "Please don't let anything crawl up while I'm here. You've never prayed in a toilet before. But you are in Rome, and nothing is sacred here, except the sewer gods." You've earned a moment of peace. You rise from the bench, nod a silent goodbye to the sponge, and step out of the latrine, blinking into the Roman sun. The air outside is still warm, still noisy, but it smells like bread and olives instead of despair. Progress. But then, without warning, everything shifts. The city fades. The light bends. Your vision spins. And you realize you're time-traveling again. But this time, you're not just in Rome. You land with a soft thump in a garden, a Chinese garden. Bamboo sways gently around you. Somewhere nearby, water trickles over stone. It's peaceful, serene. And then you feel it, that all-too-familiar rumble. You look around, praying for privacy. You find a small structure near the back, discreet and simple. Inside, a wooden bench with a hole, and beside it a set of narrow sticks, polished bamboo. You stare at them. Then you stare at the hole. It's not a sponge, but it's not an improvement. The Chinese cho stick, used to scrape, wipe, and, ideally, not cause internal bleeding. You wonder how many people got splinters in ancient dynasties, probably enough to invent better methods. If you were rich, maybe you got silk. If you were poor, well, bamboo it is. The air swirls again. You're somewhere else now. Ancient Greece. The architecture is familiar. Columns, sandals, judgmental statues. You're pointed toward a latrine near the agora. This one is simple. Stone bench. Open drain. No fuss. You spot the toilet paper nearby. Ceramic shards. Used pottery. Broken into pieces, neatly stacked. You pick one up and instantly regret it. Flat on one side, jagged on the other, it's called pessoi. Supposedly efficient. Definitely horrifying. You try to imagine the bravery required to wipe with a piece of yesterday's wine jug. You put it down before it draws blood. The air shifts again. You land in the cold. The wind bites. You're surrounded by trees and smoke and shouting. Somewhere in Scandinavia. Vikings. You find a wooden shed. Inside, a pit, a seat made of fur. Beside it, moss. Lots of it. Fresh, green, and soft. At last, something reasonable. You pick it up and feel actual joy. It's absorbent, natural, slightly damp, yes, but in a forest sort of way. You could live like this. You understand now why Viking raids were so aggressive. They just wanted better toilet paper. The world spins again. Now it's ancient France. You're in a noble house. The chamber is richly decorated. Gold trim. Marble floors. A carved wooden seat with a bowl underneath. And beside it, lace. Real lace. You're in the home of the elite. These people wiped with cloth. Washed it. Reused it. It's horrifying in theory, but oddly elegant in execution. You run your fingers along the fabric and realize it's probably worth more than your entire modern wardrobe. You suddenly feel underdressed. Another shift. You're back in Rome. Your seat is still warm. The sponge is back. And, for the first time, you almost miss the moss. You've seen what the ancient world had to offer. Sticks, shards, ferns, cloth. None of it makes you feel particularly clean. All of it makes you grateful for whatever paper product you have in your real life. Software rolled, disposable. You sit in silence, thinking about the global tour your backside just endured. And you realize civilization has come a long way. But the road was bumpy. You've seen the bench. You've survived the sponge. You've visited the shrines. You've even traveled the ancient world in search of something better. You didn't find it. Now, there's only one place left to look. Down. Curiosity gets the better of you. Maybe it's the historian in you. Maybe it's the growing suspicion that something is watching from the hole. Either way, you lean forward and peer into the darkness beneath the latrine bench. The smell is immediate. Warm. Wet. Thick. Like someone boiled old soup and betrayal. You recoil, but not far, because now you have to know. Where does it all go? The Roman sewer system, you've been told, is one of the marvels of the ancient world. A feat of engineering, a symbol of civilization. But from up here, it looks less like a miracle, and more like a threat. Somewhere below, in the darkness, is the Cloaca Maxima, the Great Drain, Rome's massive underground river of waste, rainwater, and unspeakable things. It carries everything away, supposedly, if the gods are kind. But the thing about sewers is, they don't always cooperate. Sometimes they flood, sometimes they clog, sometimes they push back. There are stories of chamber pots exploding, of latrines bubbling with unwelcome surprises, of entire neighborhoods smelling like failure after a storm. And then there are the rats, and snakes, and other things with too many legs. You can't see them, but you feel them. You lean a little farther and hear something shift in the pipe below. A splash, a scuttle, something alive, something unhappy. You sit up very, very quickly. And just like that, your curiosity has a hard limit. You learn later, much later, that Rome employed workers to crawl into those sewers. Men armed with sticks, hooks, and torches, scraping muck from the walls by hand. The foricari, the unlucky few whose job it was to keep the city clean, by wading through the filth no one else dared to think about. Some called them heroes. Most just tried not to make eye contact. You think about those men now. Somewhere below your feet, possibly right this moment, someone is clearing a blockage so you can sit in peace and pretend you are not part of a living digestive system. You don't envy them, but you respect them. The truth is, the Roman sewer system worked better than most that came after it, for centuries. It was gravity-fed, rain-washed, and cleverly sloped. But it wasn't magic, it wasn't foolproof, and it definitely wasn't clean. At best, it worked just well enough to make people forget what lurked below. Until it didn't. You glance once more at the hole between your feet and make a mental note. Never look again. Whatever lives down there is ancient, angry, and probably deserves to be left alone. For now, you'll stay on the surface, and be very, very grateful for the sponge. You've survived the public latrine, the sponge, the sewer gods, even the sewers themselves. But now it's nighttime in Rome. The streets are quieter, the lanterns burn low, the air is cooler, calmer, almost peaceful, and of course, that's when it hits you. The second wave. That unfortunate, unstoppable, distinctly Roman need to go. Again. You head back toward the bathhouse, toward the comfort of that awful stone bench and its familiar horrors. But the door is locked. The fires are out. The attendants are gone. The latrine is closed. You stand there for a moment, stomach twisting, dignity unraveling, and then you do what any desperate Roman might do. You ask around. People shrug. Some laugh. No one seems surprised. They point down alleyways, wave toward dark corners. One man gestures vaguely at a stairwell and says something that seems to mean, just go there. And that's when it becomes clear. Romans didn't always wait for a proper toilet. They improvised. Stairwells, side streets, empty amphorae, chamber pots under beds. There were rules, sure, but mostly they were broken after sunset. Privacy was still a myth. Cleanliness, a luxury. Shame, optional. You wander into a quiet street, half convinced this is a trap. You spot a dark corner near a building, shielded from view by a stack of broken crates and a very sleepy goat. It's not ideal, but it's something. You crouch. You try to be quiet. You try to be fast. And then you hear footsteps. Someone shouts. You panic. You lose balance. The goat makes a sound that definitely translates to judgment. You flee. Moments later, you're breathless, hiding behind a pillar, hoping the shadows swallow your embarrassment. You're not alone. Further down the alley, another figure appears, cool, composed, robes gathered expertly. They're using a chamber pot like they were born with it. When they're done, they toss the contents out a window with a practiced flick. You now understand why people shout warnings in the streets. Watch out from above wasn't a superstition. It was survival. You finally find relief behind a wagon full of olives. You make do. It's not elegant, but it's done. And as you pull yourself together, you realize that for all the grandness of Roman culture, its marble temples, its mighty legions, its endless Latin speeches, sometimes even the greatest empire in the world just squatted behind a cart and hoped for the best. You return to your lodging quietly. No one asks questions. No one wants the story. But you now carry something few modern people truly understand. The lived experience of pooping in ancient Rome without a toilet. And it is, somehow, worse than the sponge. You're back now. The stone is gone. The sponge is behind you. The smell, mercifully, has not followed. You open your eyes to modern walls, clean tiles, running water, a door that locks, and toilet paper, software quilted, unscented, your humble, perforated hero. You move through your bathroom like someone who has been reborn. Every detail feels luxurious. The sink, the flush handle, the silence. No strangers, no snakes, no ancient spirits watching you do your business. You think back to the sponge, to the cold bench, to the shared silence and not-so-silent moments in the public latrine, to the mosaic dolphins, the shrine to the sewer goddess, and the judgmental goat in the alley. And you realize you will never take a modern toilet for granted again, because you've been to the past. You've squatted with senators. You've wiped with bamboo, pottery, moss, lace, and fate. You've stared into the abyss, and the abyss splashed back. So now, as you pull the blanket over your legs and settle into bed, you can rest with a kind of peace that only comes from surviving history's worst hygiene habits. Tonight, may your dreams be free of communal benches, haunted drains, and damp sticks. And tomorrow, when you visit your bathroom, alone, in peace, take a moment to close the door gently behind you and whisper 2 words. Thank you. Now I'll tell you another history lesson. There was a time when the rain didn't bring water, but meat. Yes, meat. Chunks of flesh falling from the sky like heaven had a butcher. It was 1876 in a quiet corner of Kentucky. No thunder, no clouds, just a blue sky, and blood on the laundry line. Some said it was mutton. Others swore it tasted like venison. A few brave souls fried it up for dinner, but no one could explain it. Not then, not now. But before we begin, please like and comment below where you're from and what time it is. I'll like every one of your comments. Now dim your lights, grab your blanket, and close your eyes. Tonight, we're drifting back to the year the skies rained flesh, when even the weather couldn't be trusted. Welcome to the meat shower of Bath County. And no, this isn't a nightmare. It's history. Imagine waking up on a clear March morning in rural Kentucky, 1876. The air is crisp and carries the earthy smell of dew-soaked grass. Dawn's light spills over rolling hills and bare trees just beginning to bud after winter's cold. Bath County is quiet at this hour. Only the soft clucking of hens in their coop and the distant crow of a rooster announce the start of the day. You rise with the sun, stepping out onto the wooden porch of a modest farmhouse. The sky above is painted in gentle pastels of pink and orange, cloudless and innocent. A light mist lies in the hollows, slowly lifting as the sun climbs. In the distance, you might hear the faint babble of a creek and the far-off bark of a farm dog greeting the morning. Everything feels fresh and new, washed clean by the dew. It's a simple homestead, a 2-room cabin expanded over the years into a cozy farmhouse, its white paint now faded and peeling. A lean-to kitchen juts out back, and beyond that you see a small barn and chicken coop. The Crouches aren't wealthy, but their farm sustains them. A couple of milk cows drowse in the barn. A pen of hogs root in last fall's dried corn husks, and rows of hardy greens peek from the early spring garden. It's the kind of self-sufficient life where nearly everything on the dinner table comes from their own land. Inside the farmhouse, embers crackle in the hearth. A woman's voice hums an old hymn as she tends to her morning chores. That is Mrs. Rebecca Crouch, the farmer's wife who runs the household. She's a sturdy woman in her 50s, hair tied back and apron already dusted with flour and soap grease. By lantern light, she's been up since before dawn. Kneading dough and now stirring a pot of lye and tallow she will later boil into soap. Through the open door she greets the day. Clear as a bell, she murmurs to herself, pleased at the fair weather. It means the laundry she washed at first light will dry nicely on the line strung between 2 sycamores out back. Rebecca steps out with a wicker basket full of damp clothes. Feel the warmth of the rising sun on your face as she does. She pins a white cotton bedsheet onto the line, its edges fluttering gently. Nearby, a few freshly scrubbed shirts and linens already sway, ghost-like in the morning light. As she works, she listens to the quiet. No wind, no storm on the horizon, just the normal sounds of farm life. A hog roots around the yard, snorting contentedly in search of scraps. A couple of chickens peck and scratch at the dirt, one clucking as if gossiping about the fine weather. From inside, a young boy bursts out the door. Rebecca's 10-year-old grandson, Alan. He nearly collides with you in his excitement, though of course he doesn't see you. Mind yourself now, Rebecca chides him gently. The boy is eager to do his part this morning. Perhaps he's been sent to fetch water from the well or gather eggs from the hen house. He dashes off, boots tromping in the soft earth, leaving faint prints beside the larger impressions of his grandfather's boots, which headed out earlier. Yes, earlier this morning, before the sun was fully up, Rebecca's husband, Alan Crouch Sr., hitched the mule to the wagon for a trip. On the winding dirt road a mile away, the wagon trundled along in the gray dawn. Alan Sr. flicked the reins gently, the mule's ears twitching as it plodded ahead. Beside him sat his grown son William, who was visiting with young Alan in tow. They spoke little, enjoying the quiet of early morning. As they rounded a bend by an open meadow, Alan Sr. raised a hand to halt the mule. "Whoa, now!" Ahead, just off the road, a half-eaten sheep carcass lay in the grass. Hovering over it were several black vultures, their bald red heads buried in the entrails. The sudden arrival of the wagon startled the birds. With great flaps of their broad wings, they ascended, wheeling overhead. The sky momentarily filled with their dark forms. William wrinkled his nose at the stench of death the birds left behind. One particularly large turkey buzzard struggled to lift off, its crop engorged with carrion. It labored into the air, then followed the others southwest, incidentally in the general direction of the Crouch farm. Those devils were having quite a breakfast, William muttered, half in disgust, half in awe. Allen Sr. shook his head. "Aye, clean up crew of the Lord, I reckon," he replied wryly. He clicked his tongue and urged the mule on, leaving the grisly scene behind. Father and son soon fell back into a comfortable silence, neither imagining for a moment that their encounter with those feastin' buzzards held any connection to what was soon to befall their home. Back at the farmhouse, the sun climbs higher, burning away the last of the morning fog. The grass sparkles with dew. Rebecca wipes her brow with the back of her hand, leaving a smudge of soap on her cheek without noticing. She shares a few words with Miss Emma Robinson, the young school teacher boarding at the farm. Miss Robinson steps out, pulling a shawl around her shoulders and readying to walk to the little one-room schoolhouse down the road where she teaches local children. The two women chat about nothing special. Perhaps the spelling lesson planned for the day, or a neighbor who's expecting a baby. It's the kind of everyday conversation that feels safe and routine. Miss Robinson has to be on her way. She waves goodbye to Rebecca and little Allen, a book of lessons under her arm and a packed lunch in her satchel. Walking down the dusty lane, she glances back at the farm one last time, squinting at the bright blue sky and smiling at how lovely the day is shaping up. She could never have guessed that, in her brief absence, her boarding place would become the epicenter of a mystery. As the morning unfolds, you drift between the farmhouse and its surroundings, taking in the peaceful routine. Rebecca stokes a fire beneath a large cast-iron kettle in the yard, the kind used for soap-making and laundry boiling. She heaves a bucket of water into the vat and adds ashes and lard, preparing her soap mixture. The firewood pops and crackles, sending a thin wisp of smoke up into the pristine sky. The smell of lye tinges the air with a faint, acrid note. You wander toward the road where the men departed. Along the path, wildflowers are pushing through the soil, tiny splashes of color against the brown of last year's leaves. A pair of crows take off from a fence post, cawing as they glide across the sky. Far in the distance, maybe you see a few buzzards circling lazily over the fields, riding invisible currents of warming air. It's not uncommon to spot turkey vultures overhead. They are permanent fixtures of the Kentucky countryside, patiently scanning for carrion. If you follow your gaze, you might notice one particularly large bird dipping its wings, descending beyond a copse of trees a half-mile away, perhaps drawn by the scent of death, maybe that same sheep carcass the Crouch men passed. But such things don't concern Rebecca right now, and maybe not you either. It's just another detail of a normal day. Somewhere, nature's cleanup crew is at work. Back in the yard, the sun mounts the sky, promising a warm, pleasant day. Rebecca has hung the last piece of laundry. She stands for a moment, hands on hips, surveying her work as the bedsheet flutters lazily. It's almost time to think about lunch. Perhaps she considers killing a chicken for stew or slicing some cured ham from the smokehouse. The thought of food makes her stomach rumble slightly. She calls out to young Alan, telling him to wash up soon so they can eat when noon comes. There's no hint of the extraordinary event that will soon shatter the calm. For Rebecca, it promises to be an ordinary day, filled with the familiar routines that, while tiring, give a comforting rhythm to her life. There's laundry to dry, soap to make, maybe bread to bake by afternoon. Nothing out of the ordinary for a farm wife. And that is exactly how she likes it. Hold that peace close, because soon it will be broken in the most unimaginable way. By late morning, the air has warmed pleasantly. The teacher, Miss Robinson, is long gone down the road. The farm is quiet again, with just Rebecca and young Alan remaining outside. It's nearing midday, around 11 o'clock, and the sun now shines bright in a deep blue sky. Overhead, not a single cloud drifts by. The light is strong enough that colors appear vivid. The red of the barn door, the green hints in the grass, the bluish-white smoke curling up from the soap kettle fire. Rebecca pauses her soap-making to stretch her back. She's been working all morning, and her arms ache from stirring the heavy mixture. Alan has finished his small chores and is playing nearby, perhaps using a stick to draw shapes in the dust or chasing a grasshopper along the fence. A curious stillness falls over the scene. The slight breeze that had been blowing earlier seems to die down. All is so still that Rebecca can hear the faint crackle of the fire under her soap kettle, and the buzz of a lone bee investigating the honeysuckle vine by the porch. It's as if nature itself is holding its breath. The chickens have retreated to a shady spot and cluck softly as they peck at the ground. The hog lies down with a grunt, content in a patch of sun, its pink flank rising and falling with slow breaths. Even the birds in the trees have gone quiet, as if the late morning hush has silenced them. It's the kind of lull that might lull one into a daydream. Rebecca glances up at the perfect sky and wipes her hands on her apron. It's almost noon, and she considers taking the laundry down soon. Maybe she's already planning the noon meal in her head. She calls out to Alan, telling him to wash up. The boy is standing a little ways off, squinting at the empty sky. He frowns. Did he just see something? Suddenly, the boy points upward. "Grandma, I think it's starting to snow," he calls uncertainly. "Snow?" Rebecca furrows her brow. That makes no sense. March in Kentucky can surprise you with a stray flurry, but the day is far too warm and clear for snow. Still, something in the boy's voice makes her look up too, shading her eyes. You tilt your head skyward as well. For a moment, you see nothing but the sun's glare. Then, there. A small, dark speck appears against the blue, drifting downward. You think it might be a leaf caught on the breeze or a bird feather tumbling from on high. But it's red, not brown or white. Another speck comes into focus, and another. The first one lands on the ground a few yards away with a wet splat. Rebecca and Alan both flinch at the sound. It wasn't the gentle tap of a falling leaf or the plop of a fat raindrop. It sounded wet and solid. The boy takes a few steps forward to see what dropped. You move with him, your heart beginning to beat a little faster, though you can't quite say why. On the ground lies a moist chunk of something pinkish red and irregular. It glistens in the sunlight. At first glance, it looks like a piece of raw meat about the size of a person's palm. A trickle of what can only be blood runs from it into the dust. Young Alan's eyes widen. "Grandma," he murmurs, uncertainty and fear creeping into his voice. Rebecca approaches slowly, cautiously. She leans over the object, squinting. A piece of butcher's offal? Out here? Her mind struggles to process what she's seeing. She has slaughtered animals before. She's no stranger to raw meat, but finding a lump of it out of nowhere in the yard is utterly out of context. Her first instinct is to look around, half expecting to see someone playing a prank or perhaps an animal that dropped this strange parcel. Then another thump, and another. Soft, wet thuds hitting the ground, one after the other. One piece lands on the edge of the porch, narrowly missing the wash basin. Another hits the laundry line with a sickening slap, sliding off a clean sheet and leaving a long smear of red across the white cloth. In growing alarm, you and Rebecca scan the heavens. And now, against the vast expanse of blue, you see them. Countless small objects falling rapidly from high above, catching the late morning sun as they descend. It is as though the sky has opened up and is hurling flesh upon the earth. For a heartbeat, Rebecca stands frozen in shock. Her mind reels with confusion. Are birds tearing apart a prey in midair? Is this some bizarre hailstorm of animals? Meat is raining from a clear sky, a fact too absurd for immediate comprehension. Then reality sinks its claws in. This is really happening. "Heavens protect us," she gasps. "Grandma, what is it?" Alan cries, his voice high and panicked. He instinctively backs toward her, little hands clutching at her skirts. By now, dozens of pieces are pattering down. Most are small, like chunks of stew meat or slivers of flesh perhaps 2 inches across. A few larger gore-soaked hunks streak down as well. One lands with a heavy plop at the base of a sweet gum tree. Another smacks onto the tin roof of the shed. The yard, once so tidy and calm, becomes a tableau of chaos, dotted with raw, red pieces of something that was once alive. In mere seconds, the yard is transformed. Where moments before there was only green grass and sunlit laundry, now lie smears and chunks of raw red flesh, as jarringly out of place as blood on an altar. It is a grotesque confetti strewn across what was an innocent spring scene. The sound is eerie, an irregular pattering like heavy raindrops hitting leaves, but thicker, more resonant. Some pieces slap against wood with a flat smack. Others squelch into the soft ground. You can only imagine the sight from a distance. Across a 100-yard stretch of farm, a carnal downpour pelting everything in its path. The white sheets on the line are freckled with blood. One sheet now has what looks like a chunk of liver sliding down its folds. The boy lets out a whimper as a gobbet lands just a few feet from him. Alan's small body is trembling violently. Tears stream down his cheeks, although he makes no sound beyond a few terrified hiccups. He presses his face into Rebecca's skirts, trying to hide from the nightmare unfolding around him. Time seems to slow as adrenaline floods in. This cannot be, you think to yourself, yet it is unmistakably real. The smell hits you next, a coppery scent of blood mixed with the raw, fatty odor of fresh meat. It's as if an unseen butcher is at work in the sky, dicing up some unfortunate beast and flinging the remnants earthward. Rebecca feels bile rise in her throat at the horror of it. She, a woman of strong constitution who can calmly gut a hog when needed, is momentarily paralyzed by the sheer unnaturalness of what she is witnessing. Alan tugs at her arm, eyes brimming with tears. He's young, and while he's seen animals butchered on the farm, this is something altogether different. Pieces of flesh are falling from empty air. In the child's mind, perhaps the sky itself is bleeding. He looks to his grandmother, expecting her to know what to do to explain this. But Rebecca has no explanation. Only fear. "Inside! Get inside now!" she manages to scream, finding her voice at last. Grabbing the boy's hand tightly, she turns and runs for the house, her boots slipping on the now slick grass where a piece of bloody tissue has smeared underfoot. You follow on their heels, feeling a prickle of dread crawl up your spine. A soft chunk lands on your shoulder. It passes right through you, of course, as you are only an observer here, but it leaves you startled all the same. They race up the porch steps. In the chaos, the soap kettle is forgotten, the fire still crackling beneath it. The laundry, half hung, is left flapping and stained red. Rebecca flings open the screen door, practically dragging Alan inside. A last piece of meat hits the threshold behind them with a wet slap, as she slams the wooden door shut with a bang. Inside the dim interior of the farmhouse, the air is still and warm compared to the carnage outside. Inside, the farmhouse looks exactly as it did minutes before. The warm amber glow from the hearth, the smell of the morning's coffee still hanging in the air. Yet everything has changed for those who witnessed the unthinkable outside. Rebecca presses her back against the door, chest heaving. Alan clings to her apron, shaking like a leaf. From an adjacent room, a voice calls out in alarm. This would be Sadie, Rebecca's grown daughter, who has been bedridden with a fever these past days. In the dim bedroom, Sadie startles awake at the slam of the door and the panic in her mother's voice. Her heart pounds. In her fever haze, she had heard what she thought was a sudden downpour, or hail pelting the roof moments ago. But the sound was strange, heavier. She wonders if she imagined it. Now, hearing her little nephew's sobs and her mother's ragged breathing, Sadie's mind races with worry. "Ma, what's happening?" she calls weakly from her bed, trying to sit up despite dizziness. Fear trembles in her tone. Did bandits attack? Did someone get hurt? The lack of immediate answer only feeds her anxiety, and Sadie clutches her quilt, willing herself to stay calm despite the dread creeping through her. Rebecca cannot even form words to answer her. How does one explain what has no precedent? She slides down to her knees, still bracing the door with her back as if barricading it from whatever horror is out there. Little Alan buries his face in her shoulder. "Shh. It's all right," she whispers unconvincingly, voice trembling. She holds the boy tightly, and they tremble together. You glance around the modest home. The cast-iron stove, the rough-hewn table, the Bible resting on a sideboard. These ordinary objects only highlight how surreal the situation is. Through the small window beside the door, light filters in, and you see a red smear where something hit the glass. A bloody smear slides slowly down one window pane, left by a bit of flesh that struck it, resembling a scarlet handprint against the glass. Miss Robinson appears at the top of the narrow staircase, having heard the screams. She'd forgotten her lesson plan book and was just returning when the gruesome shower began. Fortunate timing for a witness, though she might not consider herself fortunate right now. She looks at Rebecca and Alan in shock. "Dear Lord, what's wrong? Are you hurt?" the teacher stammers. Rebecca just shakily points to the window. Miss Robinson, heart in her throat, steps cautiously forward and peers out. Her jaw drops as she beholds the sight. The yard speckled with pieces of raw meat, glistening and steaming in the sunlight. Some fragments cling to the clothesline. Others rest in the forks of tree branches. One grisly ribbon of flesh hangs over a low bush, draped there like a torn rag. Another glob has splattered on the well cover. Miss Robinson's stomach churns at the grotesque panorama, but curiosity pushes her onward. "It's stopped," she whispers after a moment. You realize the ghastly pattering sound has ceased. The storm of flesh lasted only a few minutes, though it felt like an eternity. An eerie stillness returns. In that stillness, the normal world tries to reassert itself. A breeze rattles the window pane. A clock on the mantel ticks softly. Somewhere outside, a rooster crows the noon hour. Cautiously, Miss Robinson offers, "I'll go take a look." Her voice is steadier than she feels. Rebecca hesitates, then nods shakily. She doesn't want to leave the safety of the house just yet. Her nerves are still raw. Miss Robinson takes a deep breath and lifts the latch. As she cracks open the door, a wave of the coppery scent of blood hits her, causing her to pause and steel herself. Then she steps onto the porch. Sunlight floods the entryway again, and with it the metallic tang of blood. Miss Robinson gingerly avoids a red lump on the top step, as one might avoid a venomous snake. The yard beyond is a sight that will sear itself into her memory forever. Not evenly scattered like one sow's oats, she will later describe. Instead, the meat fell in clumps. Some areas of ground are relatively clear, while others are littered with pieces every few feet. She sees that some fragments are entangled in the branches of the lilac bush and briar patch along the fence, as if snagged on their way down. One grisly chunk is draped over a fence rail, hanging there like a rag. Another glob has stuck onto the side of the water well. Miss Robinson's hand flies to her mouth in revulsion and disbelief. For a long moment, the three inside the house, Rebecca, Miss Robinson, and little Alan, just exchange looks of shock, trying to silently communicate their mutual astonishment. No one has an answer. Alan sniffles, wiping his nose with a sleeve, still pressed close to his grandmother. Rebecca musters her resolve. She cannot cower indoors forever. This is her home, her farm, and something extraordinary has happened here. If it is a sign from God, as she half suspects, she needs to face it. She gently releases Alan's hand and tells him, "Stay with your Aunt Sadie. I'll be back." The boy whimpers a protest, but she insists with a firm look. He relents and slinks toward Sadie's bedroom, peeking from behind the door frame. Adjusting her apron as if steeling herself for battle, Rebecca steps out onto the porch to join Miss Robinson. You accompany her, feeling the tension in the air. She stands, surveying the carnage with her own eyes now. Though braced for it, she still draws a sharp breath at the scene. Despite the bright sun and otherwise beautiful day, the yard resembles a battlefield after the fighting has ended. Lifeless fragments strewn in random distribution, blood spattered on the ground. Her mind flashes uninvited to those war years again. Bodies, pieces of bodies on fields not far from here. Rebecca's farm had seen horror before. Only 12 years prior, in July of 1864, the fields around their home had become a battleground in the Civil War. Rebecca can still recall that sultry summer day. The Battle of Mud Lick, they called it later. The gentle slopes of their pasture turned into a nightmare of smoke and screaming. She remembers a young Union cavalryman collapsed by her barn with a ghastly wound, begging for water as she rushed to aid him. She recalls stepping outside the morning after the clash, when the mist cleared to reveal bodies strewn across the mud and wildflowers. Limbs and flesh, the detritus of war had littered these very grounds. She had walked among the fallen with bandages and water, doing what little she could until the army medics came. The smell of blood and gunpowder hung in the summer air for days, and she prayed she'd never have to witness such carnage again. Those memories, though buried, surged back the instant she saw the meat falling from the sky. In that moment, it was as if the war's horror had returned, dismembered and raining down in her yard. No wonder her mind leapt to her husband and son being torn apart. Rebecca pushes the haunting image away. This is not that, she tells herself. There are no human corpses, no blue or gray uniforms, just meat. Meat from nowhere. She ventures down the steps. Each step is placed carefully among the debris. She lifts her skirt slightly to avoid brushing against a small pile of reddish, jelly-like substance that might be pulverized organ. Miss Robinson follows, equally careful. The two women move almost in a daze from one piece to another. How much fell? It's hard to quantify by sight, but likely several pounds at least. Some later say about half a bushel in total, enough to fill a basket or two. Others exaggerate that it was a wagon load of meat. In truth, the exact amount is hard to gauge amidst grass and dirt, but certainly it's far more than a single animal's worth of flesh in small pieces. Rebecca kneels by one of the larger chunks. It lies in a patch of clover, already attracting flies. She steels herself and prods it gingerly with a stick. It has substance, density, definitely flesh. No outer skin or fur attached, just raw muscle it looks like, marbled with fat. She notes the dark red color and the wetness of blood still oozing from it. Her stomach flips, but she controls it. She has butchered hogs with her husband before. She wills her mind into that familiar state, as if this were a slaughtering day. But here, there is no carcass from which this meat came. It's as if it materialized out of thin air. She lifts the stick slightly, bringing the piece up. It's heavy, maybe several ounces. A few drops of blood fall from it as she raises it to eye level. Miss Robinson steps back, hand over her mouth. What is it? The teacher asks softly. Rebecca squints. The texture reminds her of beef or venison. It's fibrous, but one edge of it looks weirdly smooth and rubbery, with a whitish membrane. She realizes with a shock that this particular piece might be part of an internal organ, perhaps a bit of lung or stomach, not just muscle. She hurriedly drops it, the realization too grisly. Up the road, a shout echoes. Both women turn their heads sharply. Someone must have seen something, or word is already getting out. It sounds like a man's voice hollering from the direction of the lane. Moments later, the figure of a neighbor, Mr. Elijah Eli Wills comes into view through the front gate, moving at a half-run. He's one of the farmers who lives a quarter-mile down, and seeing him in such haste means only an emergency could drive him. His shirt sleeves are rolled up and he's hatless, as if he dropped everything at the sight of the commotion. As he draws nearer, his face is flushed and eyes wide. Clearly, he's heard or seen enough to alarm him. Perhaps he glimpsed the bizarre cloud and red objects falling while working his field, or maybe he just heard the screams and came running. Eli slows as he reaches the yard and beholds the evidence firsthand. Lord have mercy. He exhales, removing his hat, once he remembers it's on his head. He steps through the gate gingerly. He recognizes Rebecca and Miss Robinson, but is momentarily at a loss for formalities. Ms. Crouch, are y'all? Okay, what in God's name happened? I thought I saw something falling, and he trails off, eyes fixed on a chunk of flesh at his feet. The hog nearby snorts at him, annoyed that this newcomer might compete for its newfound skyborn treasure. Rebecca replies with a voice that's steadier than she feels. We don't know, Eli. It fell from the sky. Pieces of meat. It came out of nowhere. Saying it aloud makes it sound even more insane, but the proof is literally at their feet. Eli's jaw works, but no sound comes. He kneels and picks up a smaller piece between thumb and forefinger, turning it over in his calloused farmer hands. It's about the size of a walnut, perhaps a bit of cartilage. He grimaces. Never seen nothing like it, he mutters. By now, even more folks are arriving. In the distance, you see a horse-drawn buggy coming up the road at a clip. It looks like Mr. and Mrs. Heffley from the nearby town, drawn by curiosity or concern. On the seat beside them perches their friend Mr. Henry Armitage, who leapt at the chance to accompany them and see this marvel with his own eyes. They pull up near the gate and disembark, tying off their horse with haste. Meanwhile, a couple of farm hands from a neighboring property approach on foot, breathless from running. In just a short time, a small crowd begins to gather at the Crouch farm. Neighbors, friends, and even strangers alike appear, drawn as if to a magnet by the astounding tale of the meat shower that someone likely has already started to spread. They walk the yard carefully, avoiding stepping on the pieces, exclaiming in shock and fascination at the bits of red littering everywhere. One older man with a Bible clutched in hand raises a trembling voice. Friends, let us pray. It's the local preacher, Reverend Josiah Dunn, who happened to be riding by and saw the crowd. In the midst of the surreal chaos, many heads bow at once. Hats are removed, eyes closed. Right there in the bloody yard, Reverend Dunn intones a fervent prayer, Heavenly Father, we are troubled by this mystery you have set before us. We ask Thee to calm our hearts and grant us wisdom. If this be a sign, help us discern its meaning. If a test, give us strength to endure. Protect us, O Lord, from harm and fear. We thank Thee that no life was lost. A sidelong glance to ensure no one is hurt. And we trust in Your mercy. Amen. A chorus of soft Amen follows. Many feel a measure of comfort in that moment. Even Mr. Armitage, who arrived in the Heffley's buggy and now stands trembling, whispers the prayer through dry lips. Mr. Henry Armitage is a resident of Frenchburg, the nearest town of any size. He steps forward, feeling emboldened after the preacher's words, and reaches toward a walnut-sized piece lying on a fence rail. Perhaps he wants a closer look or means to clear it off, but as soon as his fingers graze the bloody bit, he recoils as if shocked. "Ouch!" he yelps. Then, "Oh, oh, my arm." Armitage staggers back, face blanching. "It shot me in the arm. My arm's gone numb," he cries. He cradles his left arm, eyes wild with fear. Gasps rise from those nearby. "It's a curse, I tell you. My arm, I can't move it." Mr. Armitage babbles, near hysteria. Anxious whispers ripple through the gathering. Touching this meat has paralyzed a man's arm. People step back from the scattered flesh, eyeing it as if it might sprout fangs. Seeing the rising panic, Reverend Dunn again intervenes. He steps over to Armitage, grasping his limp arm with one hand and patting his shoulder with the other. "Keep calm, friend," the preacher says, though his own voice quavers. Then loudly to all, "Let us pray once more." The crowd falls silent, forming a rough circle around the stricken man. Reverend Dunn leads a second impromptu prayer. "O Lord, look after our brother who's been touched by this mystery. Restore his strength. Take away his fear. We know not what we face, but we trust you to guide us. In Jesus' name, amen." "Amen," echo the voices. Mr. Armitage closes his eyes, lips moving in desperate silent prayer. Perhaps through the power of faith, or simply the ebbing of his terror, minutes later Mr. Armitage's left arm starts to tingle with returning sensation. I can move it," he exclaims, tentatively lifting his arm. He flexes his fingers. They obey. A wave of relieved chatter and a few cheers spread through the group. The crisis passes. Privately, a few skeptics suspect it was panic-induced numbness all along, but no one voices that now. With Mr. Armitage recovering, and promptly stepping far away from the nearest meat chunk, the crowd's focus returns to the bizarre scene. All those first to arrive are unanimous now. What lies scattered about is undeniably meat, real animal flesh. The local butcher, Mr. Bill Frisbee from the town of Mount Sterling, has coincidentally come upon the scene, perhaps while on a rounds to buy livestock. He's a burly man with rolled-up sleeves, smelling faintly of salt and cured bacon. His arms are thick, and his apron is still smeared with traces of this morning's slaughter at his shop. He crouches down to inspect a piece with professional interest. Using a rag, he picks up a chunk and sniffs it, then tears a tiny bit off and cautiously places it on his tongue. Some onlookers cringe at this, but the butcher just chews thoughtfully, then spits it out onto the ground. "I cannot tell what kind of animal it came from, but it is animal meat without a doubt," he declares. In other words, it's not some fungus or plant matter, it's flesh from a creature. A collective murmur ripples through the gathering. Some cross themselves. Others shake their heads and give nervous half-smiles at how absurd it all is. Another neighbor, Mr. Eli Wills, takes an exploratory notion to the extreme. He gathers up a hefty handful of the red morsels and brings it straight home, intent on cooking and eating it. Wills's family members, however, are overcome with alarm. If the flesh is mysterious, might it not be tainted or cursed? They beseech him to throw it out, but Eli Wills is nothing if not stubborn. When he refuses to relent, his kin resort to desperate measures. Several family members wrestle him down, pinning his arms while another grabs the meat from his clutch. As Eli yells in protest, the purloined prize is carried off and dumped in a place he would not dare venture to retrieve it once he's let up. Rumor has it they tossed it down the outhouse hole, putting an ignominious end to his culinary ambitions. Only after the meat is irretrievable do they release Mr. Wills. He is furious, indignant that his free supper had been stolen, but his wife and siblings cross their arms, more than willing to endure his anger rather than risk whatever ill effects might come from eating sky-fallen mystery meat. This episode, equal parts farce and cautionary tale, will later make the rounds in the newspapers, painting Mr. Wills as an almost comical figure of misguided bravery. Others in the crowd inspect the pieces with more scholarly intent. A pair of men from town, one a local schoolmaster, the other a storekeeper who fancies himself learned, have brought along a small magnifying glass. They crouch over a chunk on a tree stump, peering at its fibers, discussing in low tones. One ventures that it looks like some kind of lung tissue. He recalls seeing something similar in a hog slaughter. The other isn't sure, rubbing his chin. Neither is an expert, but their quiet theorizing adds to the air of investigation. Speculation runs wild all around. You hear snippets as different groups converse in hushed tones or excited bursts. Maybe it was a flock of birds flying over, all disgorging their last meal at once, suggests one man, gesturing at the sky. A local hunter chimes in, knowingly, buzzards. Buzzards will vomit if they're startled. I've seen it. If one throws up, others will follow suit. Nasty critters. This notion gains traction quickly. It sounds plausible to those who've observed vulture habits. Several nod and murmur that yes, turkey buzzards often travel in groups. Perhaps a large flock had been feasting nearby. Indeed, recall those vultures the Crouch men saw earlier. And something spooked them, causing a collective disgorging mid-flight. As crude as it is, this buzzard theory gets many heads nodding. It doesn't answer why the flesh was scattered only over this farm, but it's something. But I didn't see any birds in the sky, Miss Robinson interjects, brow furrowed. Indeed, neither she nor Rebecca noticed any fowl above during the shower. Someone counters that vultures can soar so high they're hard to spot. Or maybe they flew off quickly after unloading their stomachs. After all, the event only lasted a few minutes. It's possible, folks concede, that in the commotion no one thought to scan for distant birds. What if it came from a tornado or waterspout? Proposes another voice. A fellow who once traveled to Kansas and heard tales of frogs and fish raining down after being sucked up by storm winds. A twister could have passed over a slaughterhouse or a battlefield and carried this stuff here. Eyebrows raise at that macabre image, a whirlwind of gore. But glancing around at the serene weather, people shake their heads. There was no storm, no gale, not even a stiff breeze. And if some freak wind dropped it, why were no other objects, like leaves or sticks, mixed in? No, the weather was clear and calm, making that unlikely. A younger man, perhaps influenced by dime novels, wonders in a whisper if some cannibal or wild beast met a grisly end overhead. Perhaps an explosion of what scattered its remains. His friends laugh it off. Too far-fetched. Meanwhile, a few of the more superstitious are not inspecting the scene at all, but standing back and muttering about curses. An old granny in a bonnet is overheard to say, "There's witchcraft in it. Mark my words." A farmhand crossing himself repeatedly suggests it might be a biblical plague or an omen of end times. These murmurs of witches or angry spirits are mostly ignored by the others, who prefer to find a natural explanation. At one point, an industrious fellow named Mr. Venable, reported later as Venarsdell, takes it upon himself to start collecting samples. He produces several glass jars and carefully drops bits of the meat into them. Some pieces he allows to dry in the sun on a plank, others he packs in alcohol or vinegar to preserve them. He states he'll send these to knowledgeable men, doctors, professors, for analysis. If no one else can bring clarity, maybe the man of science can. By early afternoon, curious neighbors from miles around are crawling about the farm searching for souvenirs. Making the meat shower, unlike other occult happenings, an event leaving behind an estimated half-bushel of evidence. A lump of bloody meat is reportedly found inside someone's shoe left outside on the porch. Everyone wants to take a little piece home to show their families, or to brag that they themselves touched the sky meat. One aging almanac yields a brief account of a similar shower of flesh in Europe long ago, a note that brings a measure of comfort that Bath County's mystery, while shocking, is not entirely without precedent. Tales of rains of frogs and fish in different parts of the world are also dug up from old books and newspapers, as curious minds try to place the meat shower in context, searching for any historical occurrences or prophecies that could shine a light on what guiding hand might have directed this sanguine dump. Some superstitious souls even mutter about witchcraft or a curse, but those voices are quickly drowned out by the more rational. At last, as the day wears on, nearly everyone is satisfied that no more meat will fall. The sun now hangs past its zenith, and the spring air is warm. A few black buzzards themselves have begun to circle overhead, drawn by the scent of so much free flesh. The irony isn't lost on the crowd as they watch the very creatures possibly to blame now opportunistically swooping in to clean up. The Crouch's hog and chickens, having overcome their initial fright, are feasting happily on the bits of meat they find, snorting and clucking in contentment. Miss Robinson watches a pig gnawing on a sizable chunk and can't help but shudder and remark, "They sure seem to like it very much." Rebecca eventually goes inside to tend to Sadie and young Alan, who have been peeking out cautiously. She washes her hands and face, scrubbing away the bloodstains that spattered onto her during the initial panic and the subsequent investigation. She notices a small streak of red on Alan's cheek, perhaps from when he pressed against her. With a mother's tenderness, she wipes it clean and checks him over. The boy is calmer now. The presence of so many neighbors and onlookers likely reassures him that if it's a monster or something, at least a whole posse is here. He eagerly tells Sadie in hushed tones how meat fell like big raindrops, clearly both frightened and proud that he witnessed something unbelievable. Sadie, still weak in bed, listens with wide eyes and makes the sign of the cross. Miss Robinson, exhausted and still in mild shock, finds a seat on the porch step and sinks down, head in her hands for a moment. She pulls out a handkerchief to clean a spot of blood that somehow got on her spectacles. The enormity of what happened weighs on her educated mind. She's likely already thinking of how to describe this in a letter to her relatives. She knows no one will easily believe it. At last, the yard is as clean as it's going to get for the moment. The warm sun threatens to spoil the stuff quickly. Those who remain help gather the last significant pieces into buckets. Mr. Venable, the amateur collector, ensures a good number are saved for analysis. What remains is largely inedible shreds that the hogs and chickens are steadily devouring, or that have sunk into the grass. The yard still looks like an abattoir, but at least the bulk of it is picked up. At length, people begin drifting back to their homes, heads abuzz with what they've seen. Many linger reluctantly, as if by staying near the site they might witness some further clue or explanation drop out of the heavens. But the sky remains clear and uneventful. It seems the bizarre event is truly over. At last, the reporter from Louisville who arrived earlier has gathered all the quotes and observations he can. He packed up his notes and climbed back into his buggy, tipping his hat to Rebecca and the others. With a crack of the reins, he was off, eager to relay this sensational tale to the wider world. As you watch the dust of his carriage trail off down the lane, you can't help but wonder how people in distant cities will react to such a story. One thing is certain. By nightfall, telegraph keys in Louisville will be clacking away, transmitting the incredible news to newspapers far and wide. Sure enough, within days the Kentucky meat shower is the talk of the nation. Bath County, a place hitherto unknown to most, finds itself at the center of a great mystery. Bath County itself was a quiet rural district, known mostly for its healing mineral springs and gentle farmland. Life here moved at a slow pace. Neighbors knew each other's names and horses. News was usually about crop prices or a new barn raising. Certainly, nothing had ever happened in Bath County to make the world take notice. Until now. Letters arrive from curious scholars and cranks alike, requesting samples or offering outlandish explanations. In the local general store, townsfolk gossip that perhaps they'll put up a tongue-in-cheek sign by the road. Welcome to Bath County, home of the great meat storm of 1876. The world loves a weird story, and this little Kentucky community now has one for the ages. By early evening, nearly all the visitors have left. What remains is a stunned quiet, and a yard still bearing gruesome evidence of an unimaginable event. The sky in the west is beginning to blush with the colors of sunset. The Crouch family, after hours of excitement and fear, is utterly drained. Inside the farmhouse, Sadie has finally fallen asleep, exhaustion overpowering her earlier fright. Little Alan is wrapped in a blanket on a rocking chair, sipping a cup of warm milk clutched in both hands. Rebecca sits beside him, stroking his hair gently as the boy's eyelids droop. Miss Robinson is tending the hearth, ladling out bowls of simple stew for the family. They must eat something, after all. The normalcy of a hot meal is a balm, however small. Rebecca's heart leaps with relief when she hears the sound of the mule-drawn wagon coming up the road. At last, her husband and son are returning from Frenchburg. She and Miss Robinson hurry out to meet them at the gate before they can even reach the porch, while young Alan perks up at the familiar rattling of the wagon. On their way back, Alan Sr. and William had passed a wagon heading to town, and the driver had yelled something about meat falling from the sky at your place. They hadn't fully believed it. Who would? And urged their mule faster with anxious humor, half expecting to find a hoax or some exaggeration. Now, as they pull into their own yard, they immediately sense something is off. Alan Sr. reins in the mule sharply. He sees his wife's face, drawn and pale, and the blood-stained sheets still on the line. His eyes drift to the laundry, a clean white sheet now marred by large, ominous red splotches. His stomach drops at that sight. William hops down first and looks around, brow furrowing deeply. "What happened here?" Alan Sr. asks, voice laced with concern as he climbs off the wagon. He goes straight to Rebecca, taking her by the shoulders gently. Rebecca opens her mouth, but what can she say? In an instant, emotions overwhelm her and tears she's been holding back well up. She throws her arms around her husband. "Oh, Alan, you won't believe it." Her voice cracks. Sensing her distress, the old farmer holds her tight. "We're all right," he soothes, though confused. "We're okay. Hush now." Little Alan runs to his father William, who scoops him up. William had heard some outlandish rumor on the road, but seeing the aftermath with his own eyes, bits of flesh still clinging to the fence, dark stains on the porch, leaves him astonished. He holds his boy tightly. Rebecca, wiping her tears, composes herself enough to explain in halting words. She describes how, just before noon, meat began falling from a clear sky. How it lasted only a few minutes, but felt like an eternity. How terrified she was. She admits plainly, "We thought it was a sign from God," which prompts her husband to furrow his brow in concern and pull her into another reassuring hug. Alan Sr. listens with eyes wide, then looks around at the remnants in disbelief. He notices smears of blood the neighbors failed to clean, here and there on the grass and fence. He gently takes Rebecca by the arms. "You're safe. That's the important thing," he says, looking into her eyes. But she can see the bewilderment on his face. William walks the yard a few paces, shaking his head as he crouches to inspect a leftover shred clinging to a bush. "Good Lord, it's true," he murmurs. The reality sets in for the newcomers as surely as it did for those who were here. They all gather inside soon after, once the initial shock of reunion settles. The family, Rebecca, Alan Sr., William, Sadie, weakly propped up in bed. Little Alan and Miss Robinson sit around the rough-hewn table. Bowls of hot stew are ladled out. They hold hands and say a humble grace, thanking God for keeping them safe through an ordeal they cannot yet comprehend. For a few minutes they eat in near silence. The only sound is the clink of spoons against bowls and an occasional sigh. The stew's savory aroma would normally be appetizing, but after what happened, some have to force it down. Little Alan picks at his bowl, likely replaying the rain of meat in his mind and feeling queasy at the similarity between the tender pieces in his soup and what he saw fall from the sky. Rebecca notices and quietly swaps his bowl for one with just broth and bread. To break the heavy silence, William attempts a bit of humor. He manages a weak grin and says, "Well, Ma, I reckon you can skip slaughtering a hog next winter. Just hang your washin' and see what falls into it." It's a cheeky remark, and for a heartbeat no one knows how to react. Then a soft snort escapes Miss Robinson's nose, and suddenly they're all laughing. Laughing a bit too hard, perhaps, but it is a much-needed release. Even Rebecca, mid-sip of water, starts chuckling. The notion is so absurd that laughter is the only response. The tension in the room breaks. Alan Sr. chuckles and adds, "I'll remember to carry an iron umbrella next time it's cloudy, just in case. Little Alan giggles at that, and for the first time since morning, Rebecca sees genuine smiles on her family's faces. The laughter turns to a few tears for her, but this time they're tears of relief. With stomachs somewhat filled and nerves calmed, the family begins to get ready for the night. Miss Robinson volunteers to finish cleaning up the kitchen. Rebecca, now that her initial panic has subsided, is suddenly bone-tired. The day's events have left her emotionally exhausted. Outside, the sun dips below the horizon, and the sky bruises into deep blue and purple. The sheets on the line have dried, though they're spattered with dried blood. Those will need a rewash, or perhaps to be burned. Rebecca hasn't decided. Crickets begin their nightly chorus in the grass, an almost exaggerated normalcy to the sound after such a day. The Crouch men unhitch the tired mule and tend to it by lantern light. The old farmer and his son share incredulous looks as they finally see up close the lingering bits of flesh stuck in odd places. Here, a bit of gristle on a barrel lid, there a stringy tendon draped over a twig. They work in silence, each processing in his own way. Alan Sr. occasionally mutters under his breath, shaking his head in disbelief as he pours feed for the mule. As twilight settles, the family regathers briefly on the porch. Young Alan is already nodding off, so William carries him inside and tucks him into a makeshift bed on the settee. Sadie has fallen asleep again, the excitement having drained what little energy her illness left her. One by one, the others drift to their usual sleeping spots, yearning for rest, but unsure if sleep will come easily after such a day. Night. You find yourself stepping out into the yard under the night sky as the family settles into bed. The air has cooled, and a million stars sparkle overhead. A faint crescent moon casts a gentle silvery light over the farm. The Milky Way arcs across the heavens like a pale river. The night feels calm, eerily so, given the chaos that occurred here just hours earlier. Pale moonlight illuminates dark splotches in the yard, the only remaining testament to the day's bizarre deluge, now that the flesh itself has been mostly cleared or eaten. Those stains will fade in time, washed away by dew and rain, but the memory will not so easily wash from the minds of those who saw it. The hogs sleep content and well fed. The chickens are quiet in their coop, untroubled. To any outsider passing by now, the scene would look utterly unremarkable. Just a humble farmhouse dozing under the spring moon. Yet inside that house, minds are still racing. Miss Robinson lies in her cot, eyes open wide in the darkness. After an hour of restless tossing, she finally sits up and lights a small oil lamp. Taking out her journal, she begins to write by its flickering light, carefully detailing the day's surreal events in ink. Perhaps putting the nightmare into words will chase it from her mind. Her pen scratches softly, filling pages with descriptions of the sky's strange bounty and her own disbelief. Only when she's written every last detail she can recall does she feel her eyelids grow heavy at last. The school teacher will later compose a more formal letter to her cousin in Louisville, hoping he can share it with scientific gentlemen there. But for now, she just writes to calm herself, the way one might whistle in the dark. Across the main room, little Alan sleeps fitfully in his blanket on the settee. His small face, which should be innocent in sleep, is creased with worry. Perhaps in his dreams, He still sees red chunks dropping from a clear sky. At one point, he whimpers softly, no doubt a nightmare flickering behind his eyelids. Rebecca, who has laid herself on a cot nearby to be close to him, rises and soothes him each time. She drapes another quilt over him and whispers that everything is all right, that Grandma's here. The boy settles, snuggling a bit closer to where his grandparents will sleep. Rebecca herself lies awake longer than anyone. Her mind won't quiet. She keeps mentally replaying the moment the first piece fell at her feet, trying to remember if anything seemed different just before. Were the birds quiet? They were. Did the air feel strange? Not really. She wonders if it truly was a sign, some test of faith or omen of danger. For a woman who reads the Bible nightly, the lack of an obvious lesson in what happened is troubling. After a long while, she slips out from under her covers and pads softly to the front door in her nightdress. Opening it, she steps onto the porch and looks up at the same sky. It is serene, beautiful, peppered with stars. She clasps her hands together and closes her eyes. Perhaps you can guess what she prays for: guidance, understanding, or, at the very least, peace to accept that which she cannot yet understand. The night is silent, save for the crickets, as Rebecca prays under her breath. When she finishes, she stays a moment longer, breathing in the cool air. A soft breeze ruffles the hem of her gown. Nothing falls from above. All is well. Finally, she whispers, "Thank you," and turns inside, latching the door. Later that night, after everyone has tried to sleep, Rebecca and Alan Sr. find themselves both still awake. The shock of the day's events has made slumber difficult. They meet on the porch in the darkness, drawn by the same need for reassurance. A single lantern casts a low glow as they sit on a wooden bench close together. "Why do you reckon?" Rebecca begins softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why would the Lord send something like that on us?" It's the question that's been burning in her mind, but she's almost afraid to say it aloud. Alan Sr. sighs deeply, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. He gazes out at the faintly visible yard, at the sheets still stained pink by moonlight. "I don't know that he did, Becky," he answers gently. "Not every strange thing comes from the Lord as a sign. Sometimes I think the world just does things, and we puzzle it out later." She nods, leaning into him. Her eyes fill with tears. "When I saw it falling, I was so scared," she admits. "I thought maybe we'd done something wrong, or that it was the end of days." Her voice trembles. Her husband pulls her closer. "We didn't do nothing wrong," he assures her, weathered hand squeezing hers. "And it wasn't the end of the world after all. The sun's gonna rise tomorrow, same as ever." He pauses, and a tiny chuckle escapes his lips. "And I expect it'll be regular rain that falls on us next time, not steaks." Despite herself, Rebecca lets out a small laugh at that, quickly covering her mouth. The absurd image, combined with Alan's warm tone, dispels the last of her dread. She looks at him with a faint smile. "We're okay," he says softly, turning serious. "That's what matters. Whatever it was, we got through it." Rebecca lays her head on his shoulder. The chirp of crickets and the distant hoot of an owl fill the quiet. They sit that way for a while, watching the stars. Eventually, Rebecca stands, feeling a measure of calm restored. She bends and kisses her husband's cheek. "Thank the Lord for you," she whispers. He gives her hand a gentle pat as she heads back inside, her heart a little lighter than before. Alan Sr. remains for a moment, looking up at the sky and letting out a long breath. "What a day," he murmurs to the silent night, shaking his head in amazement. Then he too rises and returns indoors. The farm is asleep now, at least in body if not entirely in mind. The night envelops it like a protective blanket. High above, the stars silently wheel, and meteors streak occasionally. Ordinary shooting stars. Nothing like what fell in daylight. It's peaceful. Still, you linger in the yard, mind awhirl with what you've witnessed. Gaze up at those stars. The same stars have looked down on countless human mysteries, even as we mortals search for meaning. 1876 was, after all, the year of America's centennial, an age of steam power, telegraphs, and scientific confidence. Yet here, in a humble Kentucky farm, something happened that defied immediate explanation, a reminder that not even the brightest minds have all the answers. In an era celebrating progress, this odd reign of flesh was a humbling footnote, showing that the natural world could still outwit human understanding. From your unique vantage beyond time, you know that scientists in far-off cities will soon analyze the preserved samples. They will debate fiercely, scrambling for a rational explanation to demystify this carnage from the clouds. Many theories will be proposed. Professor J. Lawrence Smith of Louisville, the first to get hold of a specimen, will insist in the press that everyone is wrong, and that it's not meat at all, but rather frog eggs and spawn that were somehow whisked into the air and rained down. Another investigator, Leopold Brandeis of New York, writing in a public health journal, will emphatically declare, "The mystery is solved." According to him, the chunks are nothing more than gobs of nostoc algae, a lowly plant that swells into gelatinous masses after rain. Brandeis will even have his claims reprinted in Scientific American, spreading his confident pronouncement widely. Yet, these early explanations, reached with more arrogance than evidence, will soon be challenged by more careful inquiry. More cautious analysts will step in. Dr. Louis D. Castenbein, a chemist and physician in Louisville, will examine a portion of the mystery meat and perform a simple test. He sets fire to a dried piece of it. The smoke, he notes, smells distinctly like mutton. To Castenbein, that is strong evidence that this is no frog spawn or pond algae, but genuine animal flesh. He writes up his findings for the Louisville Medical News, along with the suggestion that the most likely source is indeed vultures that regurgitated their meals in mid-air. Meanwhile, hundreds of miles away in New York City, Dr. Alan McLean Hamilton receives a jar containing some of the bizarre substance. A respected physician, Hamilton enlists the help of J.W.S. Arnold, a histology professor, to examine thin slices of the material under a microscope. Arnold peers through the lens and is astonished. He recognizes the delicate structure of lung tissue. Under magnification, the mysterious flesh reveals itself to be pieces of lung from some animal. Hamilton reports in the Medical Record Journal that the sample was identified as lung tissue from either a horse or a human infant, the structure of the organ in these two cases being almost identical. This sensational description, hinting it might even be human remains, causes an uproar and spurs further testing. Intrigued by these conflicting claims, a dedicated microscopist named Arthur Mead Edwards of the Newark Scientific Association sets out to settle the matter once and for all. He obtains specimens from various sources, some of the alleged nostoc from Brandeis, and samples of the supposed lung tissue from Hamilton. Working meticulously, Edwards prepares new slides and compares them all. His conclusions leave little room for doubt. Every sample is indeed animal meat. Some slides show the branching alveolar structures of lung tissue. Others show striated muscle, and others cartilage. In other words, this was a veritable butcher's assortment of body parts that fell from the heavens onto Bath County. From here, the question shifts from what the substance was to how on earth it ended up in the sky. And on that point, Edwards and the Kentucky locals find themselves in agreement. The simplest explanation, and the one Dr. Castenbein presents in the Louisville Medical News, is that a flock of buzzards, vultures, gorged on a dead creature, and then, flying over Bath County, collectively vomited when one or more of them were startled. Vultures are known to disgorge their stomach contents to make a quick escape or lighten their load in flight, and such behavior could indeed account for chunks of carrion raining down. This theory fits the facts. The variety of tissue types, the relatively localized area of the fall, the absence of any other source, and in time, vulture vomit will become the widely accepted explanation for the Kentucky meat shower. Even as the scientists seek answers, the newspapers seize upon the sensational story. The term Kentucky meat shower makes its way into headlines from Kentucky to New York. One New York paper dramatically christens it "Flesh Descending in a Shower," an astounding phenomenon in Kentucky, recounting the Bath County marvel in lurid detail. Scientific American prints a sober analysis for its curious readership, while other papers can't resist embellishing the gory details. Bath County's bizarre rain becomes a national curiosity almost overnight, and its story is carried far and wide. For a time, Bath County is famous or infamous for this carnivorous rain, cementing its place in the annals of curious weather lore. Still, some mystery clings to the tale. After all, no one saw the flock of buzzards overhead in the act, and so a tiny seed of doubt remains. Charles Fort, in his 1919 book, The Book of the Damned, will gleefully highlight the case, noting pointedly that there had been no rain at the time, a direct strike against the nostoc algae idea. Fort will list the Kentucky meat shower among the world's unexplained oddities, delighting in leaving the question open-ended as a challenge to orthodox science. And indeed, even today, in an age of satellite weather radar and DNA analysis, the meat shower resists full explanation. Modern tests on the lone preserved fragment, kept for decades at Transylvania University in Lexington, proved inconclusive in identifying the species or origin of the flesh. And so, the story retains a sliver of enigma even now. Indeed, Bath County has never forgotten the bizarre day it rained flesh. In the summer of 2024, the local History Museum proudly displayed a preserved slice of the very meat that fell from the sky. Locals and visitors alike lined up to see it, sharing stories passed down from ancestors who tasted or touched the mysterious flesh. Even with all our science, that shriveled fragment keeps its secrets. Attempts at DNA analysis have been too compromised by time to be definitive. Yet, standing in a modern museum gazing at a piece of 1876 sky meat, one can't help but feel a connection across the ages, a reminder that some mysteries, however old, still echo in the present. But here, tonight in 1876, none of that matters to Rebecca Crouch and her family. For them, what happened this day is not a puzzle to be solved in a lab or debated in journals. It is an intensely personal experience that has shaken and humbled them. They will remember the feeling of fear, the sound of raw flesh slapping the ground, the coppery smell that hung in the air. They will remember how their neighbors rallied around them, how prayer and pragmatism mingled in the face of the unknown. In the years to come, they'll tell and retell the tale, at first in hushed, uneasy tones, later with a bit of pride at having endured it. Bath County folks will weave the event into local lore. Perhaps mothers will playfully warn mischievous children, "Behave, or it might rain meat on you." A teasing nod to the day even the heavens played a prank no one could fathom. Now, as you gently drift away from the scene, you carry with you the lessons of this surreal day. Imagine what it was like for those who lived through it. The shock, the terror of the unknown, the grappling for an explanation, and ultimately the perseverance with a touch of humor and faith. In their shoes, would you have fared as well? Would you have had the courage to walk out and examine the unexplainable, to taste the mystery, like Eli Wills daringly did? Or to methodically document it, like Miss Robinson and Mr. Venable? Tonight, as you return to your own warm bed, the farm fades from view. The quiet Kentucky hillside slips back into the past, its secrets intact. The bizarre event is over. Life in Bath County will go on. Fields to till, children to teach, bread to bake. But this story will live on too, gaining embellishments in each retelling, ensuring that the year the sky rained, flesh will not be forgotten. Sleep now, with gratitude for the ordinary world around you. For while nightmares might bring storms of impossible things, our reality, especially in modern times, is far more stable and kind. You can rest easy knowing that when rain taps on your roof, it will be water, not meat, that falls from the clouds. And should something as absurd as a meat shower ever occur again, we have science and understanding to seek answers. Though the Kentucky incident reminds us that nature can still surprise us when we least expect it. So, fluff your pillow, pull the blanket close. Be thankful that strange rains are the stuff of rare history. Between calm skies and chaos, between absurdity and fear, the people of Bath County found their strength, and we, in hearing their story, find a renewed appreciation for the normalcy of our daily lives. Tonight, may your dreams be filled with wonder, not fear. After all, as unbelievable as it sounds, even a rain of meat can become merely a strange, long-ago tale when viewed through the reassuring lens of history. It wasn't a nightmare. It was history. And we have left it safely in the past, where it belongs,